Hey everyone, Eric Watson here, freelance writer, player of games, writer of words, recorder of videos, and role-playing aficionado. Welcome to another DM's Guild review, my written and video review series where I take a look at the adventures and supplemental material at the Dungeon Masters Guild website. With this video, I'll be reviewing the DM's Guild one-shot adventure, The Great Wyrm Theft, Waterdeep Shadow Heist number 1, designed by Christian Eichhorn for Dungeons & Dragons 5th edition. A review copy has been provided for the purposes of this review. If you enjoy my videos, consider using my affiliate links for your DM's Guild shopping, supporting me via patreon.com/roguewatson. Shout out to my platinum patrons Andrew, Brian, Richard, Joe, Will, and Tiny Dancer, and gold patrons RPG Papercrafts, Charming Grenade, Pretty Boy and Yuma, Marcos David Vicente Gilberto, Sean aka Cert2B, Adam, Dead Lizard Lounge, Alkshi, and Sam. Thank you all very much for your support. So if you have read or watched my Waterdeep Dragon Heist Roll20 review from last year, you know that one of my chief complaints was that there were no actual bloody heists in that campaign, despite the fact that it's an urban adventure that has heist in the damn title. So, DM's Guild designer Christian Eichhorn is here with a series of heists under the Shadow Heist series banner. I've been given 3 adventures. These are all one-shots. They're all sold separately on the DM's Guild, so I'm reviewing them as separate entire entities, and judging from this one, and I'm not sure what the connective tissue is there, because I haven't jumped ahead yet, but they are definitely their own story, so you can run the entire thing with just one of these. I think it's just a series that are connected through some story means. But this is the first one. It doesn't have a level range, unfortunately, which I don't like, particularly because it seems like the danger level seems fairly low, except for the skill checks are a little bit higher, and then the rewards are very substantial. So it's very difficult for me just to try and pinpoint what the hell level range this should be. And I get that a lot of heists, the point of a heist is really to not have any combat, which I think is really cool, and also a really tricky thing to do in D&D, because most of D&D systems are about combat. Think about everything your character can do, all their abilities, like everything really comes down to what you can do during a combat encounter. So to create an adventure that specifically doesn't use combat is really different. I think it's really cool, and I love heists. I think that's such a neat thing to do from a role-playing standpoint. Just think about all your, whatever your favorite heist movie is, and it's, you know, it's a party of characters, each with their own skill set, going after a goal, and maybe they don't all see eye to eye, but their needs are aligned. Like, that is, that is an RPG party, like, straight up. So I think it always translates really, really well, and I like to see these kind of adventures. The tricky thing is, like I said, this doesn't have an actual level range. It just seems like from reading it, probably a low, like tier 1, maybe tier 2, but then I would probably have to adjust like level rewards and maybe skill checks. So I wish the designer had come through and said, okay, here's maybe the level range I was thinking, but if you want to have it be a little bit lower, then maybe lower these numbers and rewards. If you want to do a little bit higher, then raise these numbers and rewards, just to kind of give me a better ballpark, because it was kind of hard to tell. I do like the physical design. It's obviously not a physical book, but I like the layout and organization and detail here that makes the adventure look like a weathered, like, dime store novel. I think that's a really cool look, and the inside of the pages kind of reflect that as well. It also has a really neat painterly art style. I'm not sure if these were just public domain paintings the designer found and snuck in there, but it was a cool effect that really immersed me into the theme and setting that this adventure was going for, and I'll show you that in a second. Overall, I'm fairly positive on this one. I think it just has a little bit of some glaring issues that I will point out, but I'm very biased towards enjoying a heist adventure in general, so I will say that. So I think I would be more forgiving of issues here than I would be of maybe a different kind of adventure, just because I think this kind of adventure, these adventures and stories, really do translate very, very well to an RPG standpoint. Alright, so for the Great Wyrm Theft, divided into 3 parts. We've got the mission, the actual mansion, which breaks it down basically like a dungeon, where it's room by room, and then part 3, which tells you a timeline of events as well as the NPCs, and that's probably the best and most interesting section. Part 1 gives you a very brief setup. There is a noble who has come in possession of a very valuable ruby, the titular Great Wyrm, which is a ruby with enclosures that resemble a dragon's eye, worth 10,000 gold pieces. That is a lot of money to pretty much every tier of adventurer, I would think. That is a dragon's ransom and ruby. And this noble is throwing a dinner party. And during this dinner party, one of the invitees is a mage from Kalimport, Nam Din, who is going to buy the gem and use for her own whatever. It's not really explained, I think, but presumably for magic. She's a magic user. And the player's goal is to attend this party, or sneak in, I guess maybe not even attend, and try and steal this ruby while it's at the noble's mansion before he officially sells it to the mage, who will then teleport out. So there's an interesting timing mechanism where the players really can't wait around. And in fact, there's a timeline of events where specific things will happen that the players will hopefully take advantage of. In terms of a heist, what I would have liked to see, especially in this part 1 section, is giving the characters enough rope to give them options, what I'm trying to say. So in other words, their person that's giving them the quest here, which is a master thief, Vivian, let them say, hey, we've got some forged invitations. You can use that way. You can try to get in the front, maybe with some persuasion checks. There's a nearby sewer grate that we know that can lead you to the mansion through the sewers, so you can get in that way. Or there's, maybe you can jump across from a nearby roof or something and get over the fences. I would have liked to see options been more obviously given to the players, because at least from my personal standpoint, if I just tell the players there's a heist here, I think it would operate better if I tell them, okay, there's a heist here, and then here's A, B, and C ways of getting in here. And even if they don't use those ways, that still maybe gives them ideas. Maybe they want to split the party and have each person do their best thing. Because not everybody's a rogue, you have to remember. And so maybe somebody would be better at disguising themselves and going in the front door. Or, do the classic thing where they can try to, beat up a cleaning crew and take over their disguises or something. I would have liked to see those more actively used here. And then as a DM, I can read that and say, okay, I like that one, I don't like that one, I like that one. And I can choose to use all, some, or none of them. None of that's really given here. The only thing that's really provided is the fact that they are set in an alleyway near the mansion, and there is a nearby sewer grate that the players can use to then go in through the cellar. Otherwise, it's kind of a crapshoot about how they get in here. There's information on each room and then kind of where guards are posted, but that's really all we get. So I would have liked to see a lot more information here, and I think a heist that did a good job of this... Oh, God, what was the name of it? I don't remember now. How embarrassing. It was another one that I reviewed that was a really great adventure. Oh, my Lord, what is the name of that one? The Theocracy. That's what it was called. Jesus. By JVC Perry. Joshua, one of my favorite DM's Guild creators, created a really great heist mission with the Theocracy that had a lot of information about how to get in there and then the patrols and all that. So that was a great example of a really detailed, well-done heist mission that took me entirely too long to look up. I should have come prepared for that. All right, so in the mission part, we get details on the main objective as well as bonus and secret objectives, which is a really neat idea here. The party is given the task to steal this 10,000 gold piece ruby, but while they're there, there are other things that they can steal and find. Obviously, part of the mission is they should not kill anyone because they are thieves and not murderers. They may be murderers on another day, but for now, they're really not supposed to kill any of these presumably innocent nobles. And then secret objectives could involve finding hidden ledgers and maps and love letters from the waifu, House Salacious, that they can get bonus money for. And it's here where I really thought these rewards are way too much for a low-level party, because if you successfully complete the mission and don't kill anybody, you get 500 gold pieces each for all of those things, and a pretty nice magic item reward. And then all the secret objectives gives you 250 gold pieces each for completing those. So basically just finding other useful bits of information that you can hand over to the quest giver. That is a shit ton of money for Tier 1 and frankly even Tier 2 adventures, depending on, I guess, how your campaign is paced and everything. But that tells me that that's more like Tier 3 reward value, and yet the adventure doesn't really seem that difficult. All of the enemies are basically guards, which are, a fairly mundane stat block. And everything is just basically involves picking locks. Like, there are no real traps here that I could tell. There's no, magical monsters or forced combat of any kind. It is basically just a pretty mundane mansion that the party has to make their way through, which isn't necessarily a bad thing. That's almost refreshing to have a D&D scenario where there's not a whole lot of actual like magic or monsters involved. It's just pretty much a you can have this a Game of Thrones setup. Game of Thrones has more magic than this in terms of just going into a mansion and trying to pick locks and not be caught. So from that standpoint, I was a little surprised and disappointed with just how mundane everything felt and how kind of easy everything felt, other than the fact that there are some skill checks that involve like DC 14, 15, and 16, which feels tier 1. That's probably appropriate for tier 1. Just that they're a little bit on the easier side for people that are skilled in those skills. Each of these rooms is detailed with a nice little descriptive text box as the players make their way through. I did have a big problem with the maps. I'll get to that in a moment later on. But otherwise, this section just goes room to room and kind of determines, tells you what's going on in that room, if there are guards, who hangs out there, and what treasures are there. And almost every location has treasure. So the majority of this adventure is exploration based, which is frankly what a heist should focus on, is exploration. The third part, festivities, is where the role playing part comes in. And here, I wish we would have gotten more. I like what is given here. I would have liked to have seen this expanded. So we get some paragraphs on the buyer, Namdin, the family. Actually, the family, I guess, was in part 1, wasn't it? Or the beginning of part 2, sorry, where the Garin family, which is the nobles. There's a family of a mother, father, the son, who's the heir, and then the young daughter. And then we're given extra guests, which these are really fun. They're basically just one-sentence descriptives, but they're all very descriptive. So Anna Tucker, military medical doctor, fed up with the stupidity of adventurers regarding their self-preservation. That's good. Let's see. One of them is failed botanist turned wealthy widow whose husband died in suspicious circumstances. That's good. The celebrated author of the salacious 7 volumes of erotic poetry. That's very good. Traveler who knows thousands of entertaining stories. A few of them are even true. These are just very fun characters. Just a very thin needle to where they can be. It's the kind of thing where if your players are like, okay, I'm going to walk up and mingle, and you can just pick one of these characters and be like, okay, I'm going to try to embody this character. So I think that's fun. As a DM, that's the kind of stuff that's really useful for me to help flesh out, especially if you're going to do a dinner party thing. Then I need the guests. I need that information. Valo's there, which is a fun tie to Dragon Heist, and if the characters, know him and are part of that Dragon Heist campaign, and they even explain what they're trying to do, he'll talk them out of it. He's like, what are you doing? Don't try to steal from these people. The best part of this adventure is the timeline. And this is the important part of any heist is, A, what's the security like and what are the options the players are given, and then B, kind of the order of events that things happen and how much the players can affect them. And in this case, it's kind of railroady in that things happen no matter really what the players do, and it's up to the players to just take advantage of these occurrences. So it tells you kind of when the guests arrive, when the characters are basically arriving, unless they, for some reason, take a while doing their setup, when they have the actual dinner, and there are 2 main events that happen. One of them is some of them withdraw to a certain room to watch exotic dancers shipped from Kalimport. And the other is a duel occurs because, a classic noble, somebody insults somebody else, and they get challenged to a duel outside, and they're, a little tipsy, and all that's trying to happen, and everybody's rushing out there to try to stop them from going on. So, a clever player, gosh, if it were me, I would so try and involve a player with that actual duel, and really, because it's such a low combat, no combat adventure, I would love to see my players really split up and everybody do kind of what they're good about doing. So I would like the high charisma people to be mingling. I want obviously the rogue to be stealthing around and snooping. The magic users can use all kinds of different utility magic spells to get around or pass without trace. There's clairvoyance. There's freaking invisibility, and which by the way means that this mission really should have had a level range, because it's not so much combat as spells that are going to break your freaking heist. If you have no magical, anti-magic shells or anything, then very, very quickly any kind of arcane magic user or even some divine magic users are going to just break all of your defenses and be able to get around. And you would imagine that in a fantasy world where magic is not terribly uncommon, nobles would afford to have some kind of anti-magic devices, and here there's just not a whole lot of deterrence, which tells me it's a fairly low-level adventure. Now, it isn't bad. I think Tier 1 characters should have heists also, It's both strange and impressive that you can literally avoid all kinds of combat. You'd think if they entered in the sewers, there'd be some kind of random combat encounter, or if there was some kind of suit of armor that would, come to life or something. I would have liked to put in just a little bit. It does feel really weird to do an entire one-shot adventure without any kind of combat. And I think you can easily do combat and have that be an option, especially if that's just a road the PCs take. For example, they go down the sewers and that's the route they take. That's going to be maybe more combat oriented. Or, if they aren't able to pick the lock they need, then this suit of armor comes alive, and then once they destroy the armor, then the door opens or whatever. Give them the different options. Don't necessarily have to force it. But here, there's really nothing there. There's also no information on what happens if the players get caught. It just feels like we're missing some pieces of information here. Or what happens if the security level is heightened? Like if you're playing a stealth video game, there's a big difference between nobody knows there's any danger. You're killing people, you're moving bodies, whatever game one of my favorites of recent memory is the Dishonored series, versus when the world is on high alert and suddenly, people are walking around and they're patrolling more often and being more aggressive. The music starts, getting more intense. How does that work in this adventure? There wasn't really any information in terms of patrols or high alert or security systems or any of that, which all seems pretty important to have in a heist. So I like the setup, but I was a little disappointed with the amount of information that was provided here, even for a one-shot that's in a fairly small area. You can see, look at these rewards for the value of random items you can find. 800 gold, 500 gold, 300 gold, 150 gold, 1,000 gold. That is a lot of reward for what looks like a tier 1 challenge adventure. That is really, really crazy. And obviously, yeah, you want heists to be worth it, because that's the whole point of the heist, is you're thieves and you're stealing shit, but holy crap. Now, the cool thing is you could make it where they have to then fence those items later on, and that can be a little more difficult. They might see the value of this thing, but it's too hot of an item, and because these nobles are going to be missing it, so they have to sell that. But none of that is in the context of this adventure either, so that would be an interesting thing to think about. So yeah, I have some mixed feelings, and then a lot of my attitude could have swung one way or another depending on what this map was like. So I was very disappointed to see that this was the map. If you have, whether it's a heist or not, if you have an adventure that takes place entirely within one location, essentially a dungeon crawl, then that location needs to be well mapped out. I realize not everybody uses, Roll20 like I do, or even uses physical maps, or even gives a shit about physical maps. That's fine. But as my review process, maps are a big deal. I like good maps, and I cannot lie. It's different if your adventure takes place, on the road, and there's just a bunch of encounters, or something where there's not a good, singular location for a map. But most adventures are based around set pieces, Most stories are based around certain set pieces and locations, and especially with a heist, for example, it's going to be the location that you're stealing the thing from, in this case, this mansion. And it's just a really, really bare bones map, which just really, it's lines and doors and squares, which is a bummer. I would have liked to see just a bit more detail, some color, just anything that I could have used. I don't necessarily have to have something I could just throw right onto Roll20, but having this be, barely usable was a remarkable disappointment. That again, if this were a really good map, that would have really elevated my attitude of this adventure. Since it is not a good map, it has done the opposite and kind of soured me on this adventure, which is a bummer, because I wanted to, I came in really wanting to enjoy a good heist adventure, and there's nothing critically wrong with it at all. It's not bad. I enjoy the timeline aspect. I enjoy the NPCs that are fleshed out, and I like the actual physical layout and design of the heist, but I think it's just got some kind of missing pieces of information, and this map is just kind of a disappointing bummer. Let's go over my pros and cons, which I kind of just did, on the Great Wyrm Theft. Pros: it's got an enjoyable dime novel design featuring weathered pages and painted character portraits. I kind of glossed over that, but if you see these character portraits, I really do dig this. I think that's really neat. I think these are just, if I had to guess, I think these are kind of public domain portraits that are being used, but that's fine. I think, they kind of went with it. If it was just a regular, format and had, other art and then just one of these random portraits, that would have looked bad. But because it fits the rest of the book very well and has a very uniform art style, I think that does look really, really well, and adds to the fact that this is like a noble dinner party thing. This would be kind of a fun, like, little booklet you would get on the nobles. Pros, over a dozen NPCs to interact with. I do like my NPCs fleshed out. As I said, I would have liked to see Part 3 expanded even further. But what we do get here is very, very solid, and all these characters sound fun, even from like one sentence, which is very hard, impressive thing to do, which is to create an entire character idea concept out of basically a single sentence. That's an interesting exercise. I think it's well done here. Pros, a well-detailed timeline of events spanning the 7-hour party. I also glossed over that, but these events, as I mentioned, like the exotic dancers arriving, there's a duel in the garden, the actual buying process, and she's disappearing, is all really, really good, and I enjoyed reading through all this. It's just a shame that there's not an. It's written in a way that like all these events are going to happen in a railroad, and I get the fact that players are obviously going to come in and screw things up. But I would have liked more options, like if there was a player involved in the duel, or if the player was somehow disguised as somebody else, or something here would have been nice to see, to have some more interaction with the actual players. But that is a really hard thing to design anytime you're writing an adventure, is how do you include players when you don't know who their players are. Pro, secret objectives that offer more rewards for additional sleuthing. That is a really cool idea as well. With a heist, well, with any one-shot, I like the idea of you getting quests in the middle of your dungeon crawl. I think that's really, really neat. And in this case, it's just finding these other ledgers. And as a DM, you don't have to tell your players anything until they get that item. And you say, hey, you find this thing that looks like it could be useful to the right buyer. And the player's like, oh, okay, cool. This is an interesting reward. I'll see what this is by the end of the session. And then by the end, they can turn it in and get this extra reward. That is really cool. I like that. And it rewards the players exploring more and more places. Even if they find the ruby, they could even be motivated to explore more places because they know that they're going to get these extra rewards, or at least you've teased the fact they're going to get extra rewards. Cons, bare bones, unattractive maps. I won't dwell on it too much more, but I did not like the map design. Con, it lacks some critical information, such as what happens if the PCs get caught, or if or when the mansion goes on high alert. These are kind of basic things that I would expect to be in any heist adventure, is what happens when things go wrong. And one of the biggest things about stealth video games too is like, is there a way to unfuck yourself from this event? When you're stealthing around and you make one mistake, or somebody sees you, or somebody sees a body, is there a way for you to reset things without reloading? Because in D&D you can't reload, or are the players just screwed? Now you're given some magic items like a smoke bomb and a blinding thing and things to that nature, but how does the mansion respond on high alert? Where do things go if things happen? Is there a contingency plan for guards to move into the room? Does the noble person grab the ruby? Does he shut off? Does he make everybody go off? Is there a clue type situation where he brings everybody in and says, okay, there's something missing, nobody leaves? Give me that kind of information there. And con, there's no level ranges are provided, which did annoy me. The danger, mainly because I just couldn't figure out what difficulty level we were going for, because the danger level seems relatively easy. There aren't any magical, like anti-magic security things. There is no traps. There are no monsters. It's just kind of guards walking around, and you're just supposed to not to get caught. So it seems like it's a low-level thing, which again is fine. I think there should be low-level heists, but then the rewards seem astronomically insane for what I would have thought would be a low-level adventure. So I just couldn't quite tell, and that bugged me that there was no level range set in there. Final verdict: the Great Wyrm Theft ultimately plays it safe with a mansion dinner party heist, while providing a well-detailed timeline and plenty of NPCs to utilize. I was fairly positive in the end. Thank you everyone for watching this video review. You can see my written review at roguewatson.com. You can support my work at patreon.com. You can follow our own D&D adventures here on my YouTube channel. Thank you.